All right, welcome into the latest episode of the Unpaid Interns. It is Friday, August 21st. Austin Render joined immediately here by our guest of the day. He covers the Colts for The Athletic. We are happy to have Zach Keefer back on the podcast. Zach, glad to have you, man. How you been?
I'm good. I've been staying busy. What about you?
Doing what we can. I mean, trying to stay busy. You've got something to keep you busy now. Training camp started this week. I guess, just your first thoughts. We'll dive into all aspects of the Colts and the on-field stuff, but what did it feel like to just get back out there and see some football and feel some normalcy again?
I'm not gonna lie. It was awesome. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, and I'll be the first to admit, you complain about a training camp over the years because you spend 20, 25 days standing in the sun and it gets monotonous. Not this year. Very, very thankful to be back on the field. Very thankful the NFL has this under control for the moment. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but no, it hit me Monday. It felt like a normal work day in August, and you're able to watch some football, and you're wearing a mask and you're standing kind of far away. But I forgot about COVID for 15, 20 minutes, which was really, really nice.
What are some of the protocols that you've had to go through to get out there, and what are you hearing in terms of what the NFL is doing that's making this work?
Well, you got to give them credit. And I know that's not a popular sentiment over the last couple of years because they made so many dumb decisions, but the NFL has done this well. And I don't want to get ahead of myself. They haven't played games yet, and I understand that. They haven't traveled. But every single facility, 31 of them, right, has been flipped. It's become a COVID safe zone and also an NFL facility. So huge portion of these facilities have been changed to safeguard the players and the staff from COVID. So, I don't park in the same spot. We drive to the very back. We don't come anywhere close to the building, really. We haven't been tested yet, but we will be tested in the weeks to come a couple times a week, I think. And, talking to some staff and some people inside the building, they've been tested 20, 25 consecutive days. And you got to trust the players. You got to trust the players. That's what NFL teams, that's what this is going to come down to. And you're seeing it kind of have an outbreak in baseball, although they're continuing to play. It's just been a couple of teams. The NBA has pulled this off flawlessly. It's going to be harder for football. It's just there's 80 people on the roster. There's practice squads. There's staff. There's coaches. There's 100 to 115 people per team that need to be making really smart decisions. And I think it was one player that said whoever handles COVID the best is probably going to have the best shot to win the whole thing. I hope that's not the case. I hope it's the best team that wins and gets to the playoffs and all that. But right now, it's working. Let's just hope it continues to go that way.
I was just going to ask you, what do you think about those sentiments? Or people are just saying, look, if the Detroit Lions stay the healthiest, maybe they're the ones that win the Super Bowl. I mean, it's tough to know what the world's going to look like in December and January, but it kind of feels like there might be a little bit of truth to that.
Yeah, and the idea was broached the other day of maybe a bubble for the playoffs, and I'm thinking I'm in favor of that. As someone who wants football to continue, if you get a regular season in and you feel like you have the 14 best teams for the playoffs, and you can finish it in a bubble situation, let's do it. It's not like teams are going to lose a lot by not having home field advantage without fans, right? Or some fans, I guess. And look, everyone's playing on an equal playing field. It's not going to be ideal, but yeah, I mean, we'll see. I think the real temptation is going to be Sunday night after games. The guys, if they win a 1 o'clock game on a Sunday, the first thing they do after they leave the locker room is they go to a dinner with friends or family and they go out and celebrate. It's been a long week, and I get it. That's what they're going to have to hold off on. They're going to have to go home. They're going to have to be disciplined, and you're going to see it. But no, I want the best teams out there. I want competition to be as equal as possible. I don't want teams to win games simply because they didn't have a COVID outbreak. But I guess it's better than no football at all.
It'll be interesting because with the MLB, it's not a great scenario, but at least you can play double headers. Has the NFL said anything about what the policy could be if a game has to be postponed and maybe their bye weeks don't line up? What could happen there?
Yeah, that's all in place, and it's going to get messy, like you said, because it's not like both teams are going to have a perfect bye week. You might have to push it into January. You might, worst case, you just might have to cancel a game, and then they'll go to the protocols in terms of winning percentage and all that for the playoffs. It could get ugly. It could be, and it could be unfair, to be frank. Let's hope it doesn't get to that. They're less than 0.5% right now are testing positive. I think you should see the facilities. I mean, it is as safe as an area is going to be. I mean, if this doesn't work, nothing's going to work short of a bubble. They have gone to every single length you could possibly imagine for an indoor facility to prevent the spread of this virus. So cross your fingers. Let's hope it works.
Well, let's talk some football. I guess the biggest impact right now is the lack of preseason games, maybe from COVID. How could that impact teams where it feels like as a fan you think they're useless, but I think those are important games. How could that impact an NFL team?
Yeah, good question. It's not as much of a concern for the Colts. I was a little surprised by this, by their decision makers. They're not that worried because they're going to get a lot of live sessions in camp where they're basically just playing real football. Colts are going to do 2 practices at Lucas Oil Stadium in the next 10 days, 1:00 in the afternoon, try to simulate a game. But it's going to hurt the teams with young guys. It's going to hurt the teams with rookies playing significant roles. If you've got a starting quarterback like Joe Burrow in Cincinnati, without those preseason reps, I would imagine he struggles in his first couple games in September. For a team like the Colts with not a lot of spots up for grabs in terms of the 22 starting spots on offensive defense, they should be okay. But yeah, I mean, they absolutely matter more than the average fan thinks. Special teams is a big part of that as well. You're going to see some sloppy football in September. I'm pretty convinced.
Well, and they've made some roster changes, at least with the numbers as well. Can you explain kind of what the NFL is trying to do there with the roster numbers?
Yeah, and this is one of those things that the average fan probably won't pay attention to much, but it could be really important behind the scenes. They're going to expand the practice squad from 10 to 16, and you're going to have the right as a team to lock 4 guys. Basically, in a normal situation pre-COVID, anyone on that 10-man practice squad would be signed by another team at any time. The practice squad guys were not your guys. They were not under contract. They're basically just hired help. And now you're going to be able to protect 4 guys. And it's going to be more important than ever to have depth and guys that can step in and play, because if you have an outbreak at offensive line, you're going to need 2 to 3 guys to step in that are healthy. So you can protect 4 guys on the practice squad. And I think teams are going to really respect the practice squad more this year. And by that, I mean, they're not going to try and take advantage of the COVID situation to hurt other teams. I think the GMs kind of have an unspoken agreement, like, look, we all need these practice squads. We need these 16 guys. The goal everybody is on board with is let's just play football. Let's have the best quality football we can do it. You need the practice squads to do that. That's going to be a really key thing this year. And teams that have really good practice squads, that have really good undrafted free agents, believe me, that's going to pay dividends.
All right, you've been at training camp this week. Let's talk Colts. What has stood out to you? If you had to gun to your head, one takeaway from this week, what is it?
Phillip Rivers has a really weird throwing motion. We've all seen it on tape. When you see it in person, it's almost like is he trying to shot put it? But he's really accurate too, and it's one of those things that just mystify the mind. It's ugly and it's effective, and it's obviously worked for him for a long time. And I'm working on a big story on him, and I've talked to some of his high school coaches, and they said, look, when you're a kid and you got small hands, you can't grip the football, you kind of just push it. And his hands have grown bigger, but his throwing motion hasn't really changed much. So, yeah, my eyes have been on Rivers the last couple of days. You know, he has had some good days and some bad days. He's a fun guy to watch. He's a fun guy to be around. You can just tell he's a big kid out there. I think he's a lot more decisive with the football than Jacoby Brissett. He's quicker with his release, and that matters. He throws with anticipation as opposed to, you know, he's throwing a guy open as opposed to throwing it to him when he's open. And it might sound like a small thing, but it's a huge thing in the NFL. It's a huge thing in football. You know, Jacoby struggled with that last year. He did. He didn't throw guys open, and he struggled with it big time in December, and that's why they fell apart. So I think Rivers is going to get the ball quicker, a la Andrew Luck in 2018 with Frank Reich. Reich likes that. He likes a quick, aggressive offense. I think the offense is going to look and just feel different with Rivers this year.
Well, before I move on to more stuff, we did hear from Jacoby with the media this week. What's kind of been his vibe with an offseason where he loses his job. He's still fighting for that backup spot and they drafted a guy. I mean, what's kind of the mindset of Jacoby Brissett right now?
Yeah, unswayed. They value him tremendously inside this organization. That has not changed. He's going to be the most expensive backup quarterback in football this year because he's getting paid like he's a starter, about $20 million. He's without a doubt the backup quarterback. Jacob Eason will not take that job from him this year, mark my words. And he's a huge commodity to have, right? If Rivers tests positive on a Friday, you've got a guy who can win for you. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be a starter in this league and win 11 games as a starter, but the Colts were 5-2 last year, and Jacoby was a big part of it. So, there was a lot of bad at the end. There's a lot of good at the beginning. So Jacoby believes he's a starter, whether it's in Indianapolis or somewhere else. We'll find out next year what the rest of the league thinks because he will be a free agent in the spring. But he's a huge commodity to have, and it's such an uncertain year this year.
All right, let's switch from the veterans to the rookies. A couple of really talented offensive weapons the Colts picked up in the draft, Pittman, Taylor. How have those guys looked so far? Even Jacob Eason, for that matter. These young guys who could be the future of the Colts offense.
Have not seen a lot from Jacob Eason. He doesn't get a lot of reps. Throws a pretty ball. Looks like a good quarterback. He just has that look. He's tall, throws a mile. Jonathan Taylor could be a monster. I don't want to overreact. It's been 5 days of what we've seen in pads, but he looks like a small linebacker. I mean, he's just built like a fridge. He's fast. I mean, he ran over Tavon Wilson, the safety, yesterday, and it didn't really phase him. He just kind of moved, and Tavon Wilson's not a small defensive back. He's a big guy. Taylor he's just got it, and he sounds like a really smart kid. And I just feel like that's a home run pick. I know you don't pick a running back in the second round, but what if he's a stud? And what if he changes your offense? And what if he makes Marlon Mack better? So that's going to be fun to watch. I don't know how the carries are going to get split up. Marlon's still the starter, and Marlon Mack is still really good. But if Jonathan Taylor is for real, you're going to have to find a way to get him the ball. And Michael Pittman Jr. just looks like he fits in. And no OTAs, no rookie mini camp. He's playing behind the 8 ball, and he just fits in. I mean, he's been with the ones a little bit so far, and he's made plays. I think he's going to be a guy that's in the starting lineup soon, and I think he's going to be the number 2 receiver by the 5th or 6th week of the season.
I think it's more than just signing Phillip Rivers, but this offense, how is it going to be more explosive? What will we see that will make this offense different than maybe some of the lackluster appearances last year?
Well, it better be more exciting than it was last year because it was boring as hell to watch down the stretch. Yeah, Rivers is going to get the ball faster. He's going to take more chances. He's probably going to throw more interceptions, but he's also going to connect on more deep balls with T.Y. Hilton. Look, T.Y. needs a double move. He needs to go deep. That's what he wants to do. That's his bread and butter. This line will protect the quarterback long enough to get that done. They just need a quarterback who will do it. That's what Frank wants to do. He wants to call games like that where you keep the defense honest. They've got a 2-headed rushing attack with those two, Marlon Mack and Jonathan Taylor. And if the receiving core can stay healthy, that's a big if. Paris Campbell, suffered through 4 injuries last year. If the receiving core can stay healthy, I really like the diverse skill sets they have. T.Y.'s looked good so far. You've got Pittman, you've got Campbell, you got perhaps Reese Fountain, you got Zach Pascal, who's proved it. This is a group that's been banged up in a big way the last 2 years. We've never seen what the receiving core can do at full strength. If this is the year they do that, they could be really, really tough to defend.
Let's go to that offensive line. You mentioned how important they are to this team. I feel like it's a move that really went under the radar, but how important was it for the Colts to get Anthony Costanzo back this year and not have him retire?
Yeah, that's a really good point because no one's talking about that. And that would have been an absolute mess of a situation because you just can't find a left tackle. You just don't go out and find a starting left tackle. You either draft them really high, first or second round, or you go in free agency and you overpay. So having a guy back that's been quietly at his best the last 2 years, it's a huge win. I think it's the biggest win they had in the offseason, to be honest. Phillip Rivers, that's going to be his new best friend because he's going to protect his blind side. And Costanzo has just been, he's of his 10-year career, his last 2 seasons were by far his best. He feels better. He's been working with the new trainer they've got, that Chris Ballard hired, and he's a technique freak. Having him back, it changes everything. Without him, I would have huge concerns about this offense right now.
It feels like he was the punching bag of some of those rough offensive lines maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago. And now he has kind of risen, as you said, to his best form here of late. Another guy on that offensive line, Ryan Kelly. Where do the Colts stand in terms of contract negotiations with Kelly? Oh, I think we cut out. Okay, we'll try that again. Ryan Kelly on the offensive line. What are his contract negotiations looking like? Maybe.
Well, I know this for a fact. Ryan wants to get a deal done. He wants to stay here. This is where he wants to be. He doesn't want to play anywhere else. And look, it's a tough year if you're trying to get a contract extension. Teams for a long time didn't know how much money they were going to have. They didn't know how much the COVID change was going to impact the salary cap in the future. They need to get this done. If it doesn't get done this season, it needs to get done before free agency starts in March next year. But look, this is a no-brainer. You want to pay guys like Ryan Kelly. You want to pay guys that will be an anchor to your offensive line for years to come. You got to pay Quentin Nelson in a couple of years. You got to pay Darius Leonard in a couple of years. But you can't let guys like Ryan Kelly walk outside the door. So this will get done. It's been delayed a little bit because of COVID, but would not be surprised if it gets done in the next 3-4 months.
All right, defensively, DeForest Buckner's been out the past couple of days. I believe you tweeted it's a hand issue right now. But of what you've seen, well, we had Matt Taylor on Monday, and he called him a man amongst boys. What are your takeaways from just seeing DeForest Buckner in a Colts uniform?
Yeah, I don't want to call Danico Autry and Sheldon Day and Grover Stewart, who weighs 350 pounds, a boy, because they're big men. And they're huge and they're scary. But DeForest stands out. Mate is not wrong. I've never seen a 3 technique with that size play for this team. And you do some research, and they've never had a defensive tackle earn a Pro Bowl bid in the 36 years they played football in this city. That's a big deal. And when you consider what this defense does, everything starts with the 3 technique, that interior pressure, and they've never really had that consistently. They've had some good players there. They've never had a stud, and Buckner's a stud, and he's going to change everything about the way they do defense. He just looks like a pain in the ass to block, right? He just looks like, how do you stop this guy from moving forward? He's going to make Justin Houston better. He's going to make Darius Leonard better. He's going to make Kenny Moore better. He's going to make Xavier Rhodes better. It all starts with a 3 technique, and I think you give up the 13th pick for a guy like Buckner, but man, he could change things really quickly for this defense.
Wow, I totally forgot that they signed Xavier Rhodes. That feels
like
forever.
On the cheap deal.
I was just going to ask about the secondary, because it felt like at times last year that was an area that let this defense down. And how do they improve? I guess one of those improvements might be Xavier Rhodes.
I think one of those improvements is DeForest Buckner, to be honest, because he's going to make quarterbacks throw the ball faster. Look, I'm not sold on the secondary. I'm not. I love Kenny Moore. I don't know if I love the rest. I like Corey Willis. He'll be better as a second-year safety, but Xavier Rhodes has got to prove it. He wasn't good the last couple of years in Minnesota. Rock Ya-Sin has looked good so far, second-year corner, but he had ups and downs last year, and he had a lot of downs. Everyone remembers the Broncos game. He got flagged 25 times. It was really 5 times, but it felt like 25. And look, they fell apart in December without Kenny Moore. They got destroyed by Jameis Winston, 550 yards. Drew Brees damn near went perfect against them. I think he was 24 for 25 or something like that. And Gardner Minshew tore them up in the last week of the regular season, tore them up. So that's the reality. And I like the linebackers, and I love the defensive line, and I'm just not sold on the secondary. I think they're going to be better because of Buckner. But until they do it, until they prove it against an NFL quarterback, we'll just have to wait and see.
Well, Darius Leonard, a guy that I think feeds off of negativity. He feeds off maybe a lack of recognition. when we talked to Matt Taylor on Monday, he said that's totally true. Every time he's encountered Darius, that's just how he is. He wants that chip on his shoulder. What should we expect from him in year three? As I think he's still not really being talked about that much as one of the better linebackers in the league.
Yeah, and if you look at the numbers, man, there's nobody at that position who has stuffed the stat sheet like Darius Leonard in terms of 7 interceptions, pass deflections, fumble returns, 270 tackles, I believe. He's a monster. And yes, Mate's right. I mean, Darius Leonard, he looks for every slight and he saves it and he uses it. I mean, he's come up to me in the locker room and said, "You're killing us on Twitter." I said, "Well, you guys didn't play well last week." And he said, "Yeah, you're right." He loves this stuff. He craves it. And I'll give him credit because I've dealt with so many players over the years that lie about it, right? They say, "Oh, I don't read anything." And then you walk up to them in the locker room the next day and they got Twitter open and they're reading a story about them. Like, these guys all lie about it. They all read everything. Darius Leonard admits it, and he admits that he uses it. So this is a guy that goes out there and says, "Is anyone talking trash about Darius Leonard? I'm going to find it." I mean, his agent got him cleats this year with all the different knocks that have pissed him off, his Madden rating, his worst draft pick label, all that different stuff. And that's what this guy wants. And look, I don't know if it's this year, I don't know if it's next year. I think he's a defensive player of the year, but before the time it's over. I think he's that good. He's that much of a difference maker. It's hard to explain how much better DeForest Buckner can make him with the lanes that he'll open and the pressure he'll put on quarterbacks to make bad decisions that Darius Leonard will just capitalize on.
Really good Colts insight from Zach Keefer. Let's shift a little bit because while I have you here, I want to talk about, I mean, a lot of people are in a tough spot right now. Lack of sports, maybe a college student who doesn't have any sports to cover right now. What would be your advice, and what did you try to do when there was no sports in the past couple months to try and come up with creative story ideas, keep yourself busy, keep yourself sharp?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's really hard. Like, don't overlook how difficult it is. And sports are coming back, and thank goodness. But it was hard for a while. And the one thing I would say, the one piece of advice is, if you're a writer, you always need to have a list of stories you want to get to. You always want to have that. Keep it on your phone, keep it in the notes section. And even if it's stories you don't think you'll ever do, or even if you don't think you'll ever get to pull it off, just write it down because you never know. And I've been trying to get creative. I wrote about Bill Polian and Jay Moore getting in a screaming match on the phone. I didn't need any access for that. I didn't need any games to happen for that. I wrote this week, this is a story I started in January about Robin Miller, who's this hated, reviled, respected racing writer who's covering his 51st consecutive Indianapolis 500 on Sunday. I started that in January to go with the race in May. The race got bumped back to this weekend, but there's great stories out there. You don't need games to find them. It's harder, but it doesn't mean your content has to suffer. You just got to be more creative and you got to work harder.
You've been a professor, an adjunct professor at IU now for a couple of semesters. What has that been like, kind of just for you personally? What's it like to kind of step back from the writing role and step into a teaching role?
Well, maybe I should ask you, right? How good of a teacher was I? Right?
Fantastic.
Yeah, you're just saying that. I've loved it. I loved it. That's the only class I would ever be qualified to teach. But I've loved working with young writers. They make the same mistakes I used to make. I still make. I've really loved kind of opening their eyes and having them read some really good stuff from out there. There's so much great work being done. And I love when they start to see what it takes to make a great story work. And I love watching their voices develop. And look, like I told you guys, writing is hard, man. It's hard. For even the best, it's really hard. And there's no shortcuts. And you got to put the work in. And I really enjoy reading students at the end of the semester and seeing how much they progressed. And I mean, you know me, I could talk writing all day. I love it. I think you guys loved it in terms of the speakers we had and getting to talk writing with some really, really talented writers, getting to talk football. and life with Chris Ballard, the Colts GM. You know, getting to learn from Matt Conti, who runs the PR department for the Colts, and just his job and the different aspects that he has to deal with. So, yeah, I've really enjoyed it, and I'm gonna keep doing it as long as Galen lets me.
Well, you always tell us to tell you our favorite stories that we read throughout the semester. So I'm going to put you on the spot here. What are your favorite stories that you give us to read in those classes?
Good question. So the bicycle thief one jumps to mind because it just was like out of nowhere.
So
And
bizarre.
it totally floored me, and I couldn't put it down. It's a story in Chicago Magazine about a former Olympic cyclist who basically became a bank robber using his bike. Just brilliantly done. I think no students ever read that when they get to the class, so I love surprising them with great stuff. I read Rabbit Hunter by Frank DeFord like once a year, and that was so prescient this year because I had you guys read it in January, and then Night came back to Bloomington February, March. It was
Yeah,
pre-COVID.
February. Yep.
And so much was written about Knight when he came back, and I felt like you guys were a little bit more educated about what it was really like when he was at his peak. We've read a lot of Wright Thompson and Seth Wickersham, and you know, yeah, I love the discussion. That's one of my favorite parts of teaching is just those discussions with you guys.
Well, you had me bring Bob Kravitz on because of his great stories with Peyton Manning and with Bob Knight. What do you've been in this for a good enough amount of time now? I'm sure you've piled up some stories that stand out to you. What are some moments that you won't forget? Maybe an interaction with a player or a phone call or something like that.
I don't have as good as Kravitz had, that's for
You don't
sure.
have yelling at Peyton Manning on the phone?
No, I don't have that. I got to know Andrew Luck pretty well before he retired, and it wasn't easy because he wall us off. And one day he pulls me aside and says, "I need to talk to you for a minute." What's up? And he's like, "Hey, that mobster story you wrote, that was incredible. Tell me more about that guy." And that's not something Andrew does very often. He doesn't want to go out of his way to talk to someone from the media. And I wrote this story about the mobster in Indianapolis and hiding, and that's more of what Andrew Luck wants to talk about. Football and himself, yeah, he could pass. But players that have not been happy with me over a story I've written, that happens. I've had a lot of guys come up to me and say, "Thank you for writing the story. You know, you nailed it." That means a lot because it's their story, it's their life. It's the best part is the interactions. It's meeting these great, interesting people, and everyone has a story. That's the best part of the job.
How do you handle when somebody comes up to you or calls you or emails you and says, "Look, I really didn't appreciate that story," or "That story didn't shed positive light on me," or something like that, where they disagree with your story? How do you handle that?
Yeah, it's part of the job. Like I told you guys in class, it's not your job to be a cheerleader. You got to call it as it is. It's a disservice to the reader if you sugarcoat things. The team knows. The team knows who's not playing well. The team knows who's playing great. The coaches know. The GM knows. The rest of the league know. The fans know. The fans watch the games. And your loyalty is not to the team. You're loyal to the reader. And it's not your job to be friends with these guys. And an important part of this is you got to be accountable. So if you trash a guy in a story on Sunday, you better be in the locker room the next day. You better not hide. If he's going to say something to you, you better be there. You got to take it. The good thing is, for the most part, a lot of these guys are professionals and they understand that. Darius Leonard wasn't happy with me one day. Then 5 minutes later, we had a great conversation. But they respect the guys that are there every day, starting with July 25th when training camp starts, all the way through January when the playoffs end. That's how you earn your respect in these guys' eyes. And if you're there, they'll respect you. And look, it's never personal, but you got to write the truth. And I think most of them understand that.
Well, before I let you go, I want to get our audience a little insight into the Colts schedule. Kind of give me a August 21st outlook for what this Colts season could be like. A lot of people are hopeful it'll be better than last year, hopeful that it could be a playoff year. What do you think about what the AFC South is with the DeAndre Hopkins trade, with the Titans maybe taking a step back? What's the outlook for the Colts in 2020?
Yeah, I think it's a playoff year. I don't know if I want to go much further than that. I think they're in that tier that's right below the Chiefs and the Ravens. I think those two are by far the best in the AFC, and then it's kind of everybody else. I put the Titans in that group as well. I think Houston takes a step back simply because you just don't replace maybe the second best receiver in football like that. Look, the Colts they're better in two of the areas they needed to get better at. They need to get better at quarterback, and they needed something on the defensive line to get better at. They got the second best defensive tackle in football. So if you look at their schedule, it sets up nicely at the beginning. There's no reason they couldn't be 4-1, 5-1, 5-2. Then it gets tough. Then they got Baltimore and Green Bay and a lot of division games. So they need to get off to a good start. I think every team wants to get off to a good start, but the Colts have to because it gets really mid-season. But it's, I'm just glad we're talking about football at this point. But I think this is a playoff team, and I think they're going to be heading in the right direction if they can stay healthy, because I think it's open. Once you get past the Ravens and the Chiefs and the AFC, I think those 5 playoff spots now, I think those spots are open, and I think the Colts are very much in the mix for one of those.
Well, Zach, thanks again for joining us for round number 2. Good Colts insight. This one was better than the last one because we're able to talk about real football happening on the field. So happy to have you here.
Right.
Best of luck covering the Colts, man. Or hopefully we get a season that looks somewhat normal.
I'm with you. Thanks for having me, Austin. This was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Take care, Zach. We'll talk soon.
All right. Sounds good.
That was Zach Keefer of The Athletic joining us here on Unpaid Interns. Always happy to have Zach along. I was one of the fortunate students that got to attend Zach's class this past semester, even though a third of it went online starting in March. It was a blast to get to be a part of his class, and I learned a lot about writing and about becoming a more creative, a more thorough writer. And that will hopefully be helpful here as we lose collegiate sports for a while. We didn't get to it at the top of the show because Zach was already with us, so we just jumped right into it. The news right now, there is a protest happening at Big Ten's headquarters, I believe, at the moment. So that is something to keep an eye on. I don't think anything's going to happen. It's just something to monitor. Parents of some of the athletes are out protesting the Big Ten's decision. Kevin Warren came out, I think it was Monday, after we or Wednesday, after we recorded with Shane Bacon. They came out and talked about the reasons that they have postponed the season and that it will not be changed. Kevin Warren very strong and adamant about that. And so in other news, in golf today, a 59 shot by Scotty Scheffler. I have to give him a lot of credit. That is incredible. 12 birdies, 6 pars today for Scotty Scheffler, who just shot a 59. In the NBA, the Pacers in a 2-0 hole, losing to the Heat 109-100 yesterday. Victor Oladipo back, but not able to make the impact that he needed to in the loss. And the Pacers in a hole. They'll play tomorrow 3:30 on TNT. Just a PSA for those who are watching or listening, who are students here at IU or maybe anywhere. I would urge you to take the necessary precautions here in the next couple weeks, because school's supposed to start in just 3 days' time. And I drive around Bloomington and I get concerned. I mean, there's people out there. I'm not going to say that I don't want to have a good time and go out and hang out with my friends. I do, but it's just not the right time for it. I'm just going to sit here now and say that. And I hope people are listening and watching and realize that there are better ways to go about this than just ignoring the protocols, ignoring the regulations that IU is putting in place. And I hope that people will have a change of heart. I don't know if that will happen, but if you want to have in-person classes, if you want to keep living in Bloomington with your friends and have a semester that you get to enjoy, you got to take a step back and remember that there are not only this is not a decision that will only impact you. There are nursing students that need in-person clinicals. There are environmental students who need to be out in the field. There are tons of people, art majors that need to be out music people that need to be playing, theater that need to be acting. And there's just some majors, some minors, some classes that cannot go online. So when you go out next time and you think you're going to go out and have fun with 20, 25, 30 people, keep in mind those people who need in-person classes. Keep in mind the people who need the training, who need the hours to get a job post-college. It's not all about us as individuals. It's about thinking about the grand scheme of things. And I hope that that enters into some people's minds here as we head into the start of the school year. That'll wrap things up here for Unpaid Interns in this Friday episode. Huge thanks to Zach Keefer for again stopping by. Great week of guests with Matt Taylor, Shane Bacon, and Zach Keefer Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Go and check out all of our episodes on the IU Sports Media YouTube page if you want to see our faces, or you can listen to it wherever you are and wherever you want to find a podcast under Unpaid Interns. We have all of our previous 40 episodes up online in podcast and video form. Next week, more great guests to come. We are moving to 10 a.m. as live sessions on YouTube. I know this week's been a little off because we've had a couple of guys come on from Colts training camp, which has been taking place during our normal recording time. But we will move our normal recording time from 11 a.m. to 10 a.m. because I am a student and I have a class at 11:15 starting on Monday. So we will look to record at 10 a.m. on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday starting next week. Again, a huge thank you to all our listeners and our followers and our subscribers. We started this podcast over 3 months ago, and who would have thought it would turn out to be 41 fantastic episodes, and we're still going strong, and we're still excited to bring more and more great people to you. So excited for next week, excited for the future of Unpaid Interns, but for now, we'll wrap up our Friday episode. For Zach Keefer, I'm Austin Render. Have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday.